Oh boy. Did everyone else get that
Very
note?
official now.
I know. Will the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, June 16th, 2021, please come to order? This evening's meeting will be in a virtual planning and zoning meeting via the Zoom platform. Our procedures will be as follows. 1, when you first enter the meeting, you will be in the virtual waiting room until the meeting host admits you. Aaron and I will serve as co-hosts for this meeting. 2, please be aware that your camera, if you have one, and your microphone will be muted by the meeting hosts when you enter the meeting. You can turn on your camera at any time so you can be seen by others when and if you so choose. In order to run an efficient and orderly meeting in this virtual environment, unless stated otherwise by the meeting chairman during the meeting host will keep everyone other than commission members muted. You will still be able to hear everything said by commission members, even if you are muted and your camera is not on. There will be the opportunity for public comment during public hearings, at which time public participants will be unmuted. The secretary will read the legal call of the meeting as published according to Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B. I'm not sure it's still 7B, but according to Governor Lamont's Executive Order. 4, during the public hearing, the applicant will be invited to present the application, explaining to the commission and others present what is being requested. The meeting host will share all related documents on the screen as needed. In addition, all applications and supporting materials for each application on the agenda are available through the public meeting calendar page of the Town of Guilford, www.ci.guilford.ct.us, and also through a direct link on the Planning and Zoning page. 5, comments of town agencies will be read for each application if there are any. There will be clarifying questions from commissioners. There will then be the opportunity for clarifying questions from the audience. Please raise your hand through the Zoom platform and wait to be called on and unmuted. After questions, we will solicit comments from the public. First, those who wish to support the application may come forward. Second, those who oppose the application will then come forward. As this is a public hearing, it must be recorded. It is necessary for speakers to identify themselves each time they speak by stating their name and address. 7, the applicant will then have the opportunity to address any questions and concerns raised by the public or commissioners. 8, once the public hearing is closed, the applicant is free to leave or remain for the balance of the public hearings and regular meeting, during which time the commission will try to reach a decision on each application. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decision of this commission and has the right to appeal to Superior Court if desired. 9, decisions of this meeting are available the day after the meeting by calling Planning and Zoning at 203-453-8039 or by emailing planning.zoning@ci.guilford.ct.us after 9 a.m. If you call, you'll probably be speaking with Lisa, so please be nice. 10, all actions taken tonight by the commission will be by roll call vote. All commissioners and staff will identify themselves for the record before speaking. Seated this evening are the following members. I would ask that you wave your hand and identify yourself. Alan Brown. Thank you. Scott Edmond.
Hello.
Yes, for you.
Frank DeAndrea.
Yes.
Hola.
Sean Cosgrove.
Hello.
Bill Freeman. That's Bill. He's muted still. I'm Phil Jones.
Hello, I'm here.
There we go. Do we have anybody else jump in? Are we good? That's it for now. Our town staff this evening is Aaron Mannix, our zoning enforcement officer, George Kroll, our town planner, and Lisa Piombino, our administrative assistant. Let's see. This meeting will be recorded via the Zoom platform and made available on the town website for viewing. Do we actually have the legal notice? And I don't see Richard. So Scott, do you want to grab that?
Yes.
And run with it?
Notice is hereby given that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on June 16th, 2021. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting will be conducted through a web and phone meeting only. Attendees are advised to not go to the regular community center location because a physical meeting will not take place. Please see below signed in information to the Zoom meeting. The following applications will be heard. Town of Guilford, 45 Stonehouse Lane, map 33, lot 15, zone R-3, request for a 3-lot re-subdivision CAM. James Paul Kennefic, 73 Water Street, map 32, lot 38, Zone R3, special permit request per section 273-19 accessory apartment over an existing attached two-car garage. Copies of these applications are available for inspection in the Planning and Zoning Office and on the town's website, www.ci.guilford.ct.us. At this hearing, persons may attend by either phone or web connection and shall be heard. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order 7B, any materials relevant to matters on the agenda, including but not limited to materials related to specific applications, if applicable, shall be submitted to the agency a minimum of 24 hours prior and posted to the agency's website for public inspection prior to, during, and after the meeting. And any exhibits to be submitted by members of the public shall, to the extent feasible, be submitted to the agency a minimum of 24 hours prior to the meeting and posted to the agency's website for public inspection prior to, during, and after the meeting. All written correspondence shall be submitted to the planning.zoning@ci.guilford.ct.us. Documents are available at the Planning and Zoning Office. Dial 203-453-8039 for assistance. In accordance with the Governor's Executive Order 7I, this legal notice is being published on the Town of Guilford website, www.ci.guilford.ct.us, dated Guilford, Connecticut, this 4th day of June, 2021. Phil Johnson, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Scott. Would someone like to make a motion to open our public
moved.
hearings?
Second.
Thank you. Quick roll call vote. Bill Freeman? Yes? He's muted.
Yes.
Thanks, Bill. Sean Cosgrove?
Yes.
Frank DeAndrea?
Yes.
Scott Edmund?
Yes.
Alan Brown?
Yes.
I will also vote yes. First item on our agenda is Town of Guilford, 45 Stonehouse Lane, map 33, lot 15, zone R-3, request for a three-lot re-subdivision, coastal area management. Is someone here to present for the Town of Guilford, or does someone like to open with some comments, specifically perhaps our first selectman?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize that you're getting the junior varsity team tonight. Sandy Ruoff normally would be making this presentation as the chair of the committee that's been working on this project for some time. And I'm sure Scott could probably fill in better than I can because he's also a member of that group. I'm thrilled to be here just to present this request for the subdivision, because this is an integral step in Guilford completing a commitment to building affordable housing within our community. As many of you probably are aware, the town of Guilford has donated the land for this affordable housing project adjacent to the Woodruff property. We're thrilled to be working with NeighborWorks New Horizons, our selected developer on this project. I will let Karen Patrick talk to some of those details as we go on in terms of, but this is a critical step, subdividing this property into the property that will specifically be used for the affordable housing complex, which, and again, Karen can correct me if I'm wrong, but at one point was 16 affordable housing units, which in Guilford is really known as workplace housing. It is also adjacent to the Guilford Children's Center. And I suspect this subdivision probably should have happened some time ago. But the Guilford Children's Center is one piece. The affordable housing is another. And then the third is a portion that the town of Guilford is going to retain because there are some concerns relative to the fact that it was originally on a landfill site. And we are understanding of the fact that NeighborWorks New Horizons does not want to acquire that particular portion. So the town will also hold on to that piece, which obviously is adjacent to a parcel, the 50 driveway location, which the town has recently entered into contract with to buy, otherwise known as the Thane property, and then our public works facility. But I'm thrilled that we are at this point. Government works at a glacial pace, but slowly, we will get there. And I would ask that the commission consider thoughtfully this application, and with the support of the entire Board of Selectmen and a significant turnout at a public hearing we had for this project. So I would urge that you move forward with and approve this. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Is someone here to actually present the application itself?
I think that's Karen Patrickman, which I was supposed to introduce. Karen,
Let me,
floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. Good evening. My name is Karen Patrickman, founding principal of Patrickman Architects, located at 20 Grand Avenue, New Haven. I'm also a Guilford resident of 16 years. I've served as member and chair of the town's design review committee for the majority of those years. You know the history well enough. I don't think we need to go into the history of this project, but I just want to remind everyone in early 2020, which was the last time we had activity on this project, there were two things that happened. There was an all-town meeting that was held where an overwhelming majority of Guilford residents voted to donate the land to NeighborWorks for an affordable housing development. We then proceeded to Historic District Commission, who could not approve entirely, but wrote a very strong letter of support for the project so that we could proceed and only come back to them immediately before permitting. So we are working with NeighborWorks, New Horizons, the developer, and La Rosa Building Group. Ron Penton is here tonight. From La Rosa to bring this project through the initial site regulatory approvals in order to qualify for competitive funding in December 2021, so at the end of this year. A first important step in our process of these site approvals is a re-subdivision of the town property into 3 parcels to allow for that development. So the discussion of the project development itself will come at a later date, likely the end of the summer. But tonight we are here to discuss the re-subdivision of the large parcel owned by the town into 3 parcels, which you'll see are parcels A, B, and C. Mike Harkin of Harkin Engineering will be presenting the site civil aspects of the application, which is really the bulk of the presentation. But just want to let you know I'm here to answer any questions. And with that, I will hand it over to Mike.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Michael Harkin. I'm a professional engineer and principal of Harkin Engineering, located at 78 Wolf Hollow Lane in the town of Killingworth, Connecticut. Again, here tonight on behalf of the town of Guilford for their project entitled Woodruff Property Housing Development. You know, it's kind of a long name, so we say that 3 times fast. It's Woodruff Property Housing Development. Again, just for the record, the architect on record is Patrickman Architects. You just heard from Karen. The civil aspect is from our firm, Harkin Engineering, LLC. The surveyor of record is Anderson Engineering and Surveying. Again, a Guilford, longtime Guilford resident and Guilford company. And the soil scientist of record is Mr. Richard Snarsky. So again, I'm just going to give a brief overview because it is just a simple re-subdivision. Again, basically breaking the large parcel into 3 smaller. So the property is located at 45 Stonehouse Lane. It's known as map 33, lot 15. Again, it's in zone R3. Currently, it's 8.8 acres. It does have about 1.5 to 2 acres of inland and tidal wetlands on it. Hence, we also need the CAM application. Again, it's a 3-lot re-subdivision of the parcel. The parcel has already had something split off of it, so it's not a subdivision. It's a re-subdivision. Aaron, if you could put our drawings up on the... All right, there you go. You can see the entire parcel in this one. This is the survey by Anderson. It's 8.8 acres. You can see the large chunk of wetland, and then you can see Sluice Creek to the easterly property line. And then on that parcel, we have Rollwood Park up in the upper left-hand corner. We have the food pantry, and then we have the daycare. So our proposed project, Aaron, if you can go to, I believe, sheet number 3. Okay, so sheet number 3.
Or do you want it bigger?
No, that's fine. Sheet number 3, we're again subdividing it into 3 lots. The first lot would be parcel A, which would contain Rollwood Park, the food pantry, and the daycare. And Aaron is outlining it with the cursor. That's parcel A. Again, that will be part of the town parcel. Parcel B would have frontage on Stonehouse Lane, come down Sluice Creek, and then come across the wetlands as the cursor is showing. And then it would come towards the back of the property, up, and then again, border the parking area of parcel A. Then we have parcel C, which is the remainder of the land. Again, as First Selectman had indicated, that will again remain part of the town property. So parcel A is 2 acres, parcel B is 2.85 acres, and parcel C is 3.95 acres. If you can go to the, I believe sheet 6, maybe, Aaron. One more down, please. There you go. So as you can see here, this is a proposed schematic layout of the site. You can see A, B, C, D. Those are the buildings that Patrick Architects have preliminary designed as well as a site layout. You can see we'll be utilizing the existing driveway of parcel A coming in. We don't have a new curb cut. We'll be utilizing that. And then we have the parking in the area as shown by the cursor. We'll have a sidewalk system in some way, shape, or fashion to circulate through. You know, it's important to note that this project is close to the rail system, close to downtown, close to the sidewalks, biking and walking areas. So if you scroll down to the next sheet, please, Aaron, which is kind of a colored schematic of this area that Patrick Architects has put together. This was requested by the Inland Wetlands Commission, just showing the overall site, showing the amount of impervious area. You can see there's very little being added, and you kind of get a gist of how this all lays out in the grand scheme of things with the surrounding buildings. It's important to note that we've been working on this for a while in the town. Some of you may know, a few years now. The plans that you see, we do have health department approval for the re-subdivision. So we already have that in place. We also have the inland wetlands boundary clarification. We also have favorable wetlands referral for the re-subdivision. So we have all the items in place. We just hope that tonight that the Planning and Zoning Commission would look favorably upon this project. If you could scroll down one more time, Aaron. I just, we put this together. This is the preliminary schematic layouts of the proposed buildings, one of the proposed buildings that Karen and Patrick Architects have put together. You know, it's just an overall design that kind of fits in with the neighborhood. And if you want to hear more about the architectural aspect, you know, again, Karen is here to discuss it. So I think with that being said, that's pretty much, you know, a real brief presentation of what's going on. Again, we're just here for the re-subdivision, the splitting of the property. All the lots meet the criteria of the planning and zoning regulations. We've already had review meetings for the next phase with the fire department, as well as the police department. You know, just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So, you know, with that being said, I think that ends our brief presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Mike, can we just speak to the easements that are proposed on the property?
Yep. So right now, the parcel as a whole, the town is draining the drainage easements onto their own property. Obviously, when parcel B gets split off, that property will no longer be owned by the town of Guilford. So what we've done is we placed drainage easements for some of the water coming off of Stonehouse Lane. You can see it's in that hatched area and where the cursor that Aaron is showing. There also is a drain coming out of the parking area that will come onto the property. That's been a hatched easement as well. And then we have the easement for the driveway. That is for the egress and for utilities coming through. And then we also have put a strip of a walking access easement that comes all the way down onto the town's property and onto driveway. So we're getting a great circulation pattern throughout the whole parcel.
Thank you.
We actually have a couple of memos. We have a memo from Kevin McGee, the environmental planner. Frank, do you want to grab that one?
Sure. Can you put it up, Aaron?
Yes. Sorry.
I can put it up. You got it? There you go.
All right. This is dated June 15, 2021 to the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission from Kevin McGee, the environmental planner. The subdivision, Town of Guilford, Stonehouse Lane and Whitfield Street. The applicant is proposing to re-subdivide an 8.8 acre parcel into 3 lots as part of the design of the property. Stormwater controls noted in the Planning and Zoning Commissioner's checklist to guide low-impact development, best management practice should be installed. At the Inland and Wetlands meeting on June 9th, 2021, the Guilford Inland and Wetlands Commission approved the wetlands boundary clarification and referred favorably to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the re-subdivision shown on the map titled, quote, Record Re-Subdivision Map Dash Section B, property of Town of Guilford, Stonehouse Lane and Old Whitfield Street, Guilford, Connecticut, end quote, prepared by Anderson Engineering and Surveying Associates, dated March 31st, 2021, and revised to April 12th, 2021. With the notation that the Inland Wetlands Commission determined that work being conducted within the project area outside of the 100-foot inland wetland upland review area is likely to impact the wetlands and therefore is regulated activity under the jurisdiction of the Guilford Inland Wetlands Commission.
Okay,
Is there any more to that?
I believe that's it. So there's no,
Mark from Sonia Marino.
Right.
great. Sean, you want to grab that one?
Sure. To Planning and Zoning from Sonia Marino, June 1st, 2021, regarding 45 Stonehouse Lane, map 33, lot 38, re-subdivision. The proposed 3-lot subdivision / lot line change A, B, and C designed by Michael Harkin, PE, professional engineer, dated April 14th, 2021, last revised May 11th, 2021, has been approved by the Health Department. Please note that a detailed septic plan by a professional engineer and building plans will be needed to build on parcel B. The project description on the plan states that the building will all be under 2,000 gallons per day and collectively under 7,500 gallons per day. Therefore, the project on parcel B will be under the local health department jurisdiction.
Quick question, Aaron.
Yes,
So this is technically an R3 zone.
yes.
Are we eventually going to have, do our regulations currently allow for multifamily housing in R3?
Well, the affordable, maybe George, you want to take that. The affordable housing is allowed by special permit.
Right, that's correct. If the developer of affordable housing is a nonprofit with that purpose in mind, it's a special permit application. So you'll see a special permit application later in the summer, as Karen said, along with the coastal area management application, which will include all the detailed engineering as well as the final architecture, but it is allowed by special permit.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Are there any questions from commissioners with respect to this application? Are there, I should kick this back. Michael, do you have anything more you'd like to add? I don't want to.
Just one quick thing. I just want to introduce two parties that are on here. Aaron Hoffman is here from NeighborHooks New Horizon. You'll probably be seeing him a lot in the next phase. So Aaron, if you'd just like to say something to introduce yourself, because I think they'll be seeing you pretty soon.
Let me unmute you. Hold on. There you go.
Hi, my name is Aaron Hoffman, the Director of Real Estate Development with NeighborWorks New Horizons, 235 Grand Street, New Haven. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you all tonight. We are very excited to partner with the city on this project and what we believe will be a wonderful asset to the town, its residents, and everybody involved. So I look forward to working with all of you throughout this project. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. Thank you.
Thanks. I mean, I think at this point, the subdivision part's pretty straightforward. I suspect once we get to the special permit part, we'll have lots of questions for you, but I think we're pretty
Yep, and one last person we'd like to introduce, I know Karen touched base, is Ron Penton from La Rosa Building Group. Ron, do you want to say anything today to everybody? Just introduce yourself, because again, you'll be seeing a lot of Ron as well on the site.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Ron Penton. I live in North Haven, where I also spent 10 years on inland wetlands and 6 years on P&Z. So I'm used to being on your side of the table. La Rosa Building Group's looking very forward to working in Guilford on this, what we think is very exciting project. We've been working very closely with Karen and Mike to make sure that the site design is as environmentally friendly as possible. and we'll be looking forward to working closely with the building department to make sure we play by the rules.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Are there any questions from commission members? I don't see any. Are there any questions from the public? Would anyone like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anybody interested in speaking against this application? Again, tonight we're just discussing and acting hopefully upon the subdivision of the property, which will allow us to move forward to the next steps. Okay. What's next, Aaron? A motion to close?
Motion to close.
Second.
I'll do a quick roll call vote. Bill Freeman,
Yes.
Sean Cosgrove,
Yes.
Frank DeAndrea,
Yes.
Scott Edmund,
Yes.
Alan Brown.
Yes.
I will also vote yes. Okay. Let me just go quick to our agenda for our next item. James Paul Kennefic, 73 Water Street, map 32, lot 38, zone R3, special permit request per section 273-19, accessory apartment over existing 2-car garage.
Yes, good evening.
Hi, if you could just state your name and address for the record, that would be terrific.
James Paul Kennefic, 73 Water Street.
Thank you. And if you could just explain to us a little about the apartment and make sure it checks all the boxes, I'm sure we can move you along pretty quickly.
Okay. I just completed building a new house. It was a vacant lot for the past 10 years. And just completed a new house, about a 32 square foot home with a 2-car attached garage at the intersection of Water Street and Howard Drive. And above the 2-car garage, I have plans for a 1-bedroom accessory apartment, just over 600 square feet. And just going through the process. It's the first time for me, so for something like this. So I'm here for questions, whatever you may have.
Terrific. Let me just see if we have any memos in place from town staff. We have a memo from the health department.
Yeah, and there's a typo in that memo.
Okay, well, why don't you take it because you've identified it.
Okay. So to planning and zoning from Sonia Marino, dated June 15th, 2021, regarding James Paul Kennefic, 73 Water Street, map 32, lot 38, accessory apartment over an existing 2-car garage. A code, it says complaint, it should be compliant, I believe.
Yes.
A code compliant system, septic system was installed on the buffer of this property. As part of the installation of the septic system, it was sized to include an additional bedroom. The health department has reviewed and approved this project. The applicant has demonstrated compliance with the requirement 19-13-B100A.
Terrific. Aaron, does this basically check all the boxes with respect to accessory apartments?
Yes, James, the only question would be your third parking space. I know you have a turnaround area currently in the driveway. Are you proposing to expand that area for a third parking space? You're muted again.
Sorry about that. The turnaround space is slated to be paved in August or September. It's being increased to a 22 by 22 area for 2 additional cars to park.
Okay. So
Great.
yes, it does meet all of the zoning requirements then.
Okay. James, as you may know, we have a 2-meeting requirement for special permits, which can be waived by a supermajority vote of the Planning and Zoning Commission. At some point, I'll do a quick ask, but I'm going to ask the commissioners if they have any questions for you with respect to this application. Any commissioner? No? I will put it out to the public. Does anybody have any questions with respect to the application that's been presented? It's pretty straightforward, and believe it or not, I think eventually, the new House bill, which was just signed, will probably take this out of planning and zoning's hands and make it more of an administrative approval. But right now, this is what we have. Are there any comments or questions from the public, either in favor or against this application? Okay. Would someone on the commission like to make a motion to waive the second public hearing with respect to this application?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Quick roll call vote. Bill Freeman,
Yes.
Sean Cosgrove,
Yes.
Frank DeAndrea,
Yes.
Scott Edmund,
Yes.
Alan Brown.
Yes.
I will also vote to waive that. We will act on this tonight. Thank you for your application. Thanks you for going through the process too. It's
Okay.
We have seen some of these that are after the fact, and it's nice to have people go through the process. It makes it a lot easier for us.
No, they're very helpful at the Building and Zoning Department. I appreciate that. Thank you, Aaron. And thank you, folks. Much appreciated.
Aaron, do we want to act on these first, or we
Sure.
want to go to Mike's Antique Shop?
You can take action on that is a site plan approval, so as you can move on to deliberation of public hearing items,
Okay.
that would be fine.
Do we have a motion with respect to the town of Guilford, 45 Stonehouse Lane?
Yes.
If you put it up, I'll read it.
There we go, Frank. I never have to ask you twice.
Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a re-subdivision application for the town of Guilford at 45 Stonehouse Lane, map 33, lot 15, in a coastal area management application to create lots as shown on, quote, record subdivision map, section B, property, town of Guilford, end quote, prepared by Anderson Engineering and Surveying Associates, dated March 31st, 2021, revised on 4/12/2021. This application is approved based on a finding that it conforms with the zoning code and is consistent with the coastal management policies of the state of Connecticut.
Great. You have a second on that?
Second.
Discussion, any problems, questions, concerns? I mean, I didn't see any, there's no conditions. I mean, I'm sure the conditions will come through during the construction phase with respect to, but just for the paper subdivision, I think there's not a whole lot of conditions we need to put on it. Any discussion, problems, questions? I'll call the vote then. We have a motion and a second. Alan Brown?
Yes.
Scott Edmund?
Yes.
Frank DeAndrea?
Yes.
Sean Cosgrove?
Yes.
Bill Freeman?
Yes.
I will also vote yes. We have a subdivision once it's been filed with the town clerk, if I believe that's the process. Next is there a motion for Mr. Kenefick's 73 Water Street special permit? There we go.
Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a special permit for an accessory apartment for James Kenefick at 73 Water Street, map 32, lot 38, as shown on the zoning location, survey and sanitary system design for James Paul Kenefick, prepared by Anderson Engineering and Surveying Associates, dated April 18th, 2019, revised to 8/8/19, and the Kenefick residence, prepared by Spindrift Design LLC, dated 4/30/2019, and revised on 8/18/2019. This application is approved based on a condition that it conforms with the zoning code, section 273-19. The special permit is effective on June 25th, 2021, and upon filing with the town clerk.
Thank you, Frank. We have a second for that?
Second.
Thank you, Alan. Any problems or questions? I mean, this is kind of exactly the way it's supposed to work, with people bring the stuff forward in advance. And Aaron has made sure it checks all the boxes. Thank you, Aaron. Any discussion, concerns? I'll call the vote. Bill Freeman,
Yes.
Sean Cosgrove,
Aye.
Frank DeAndrea,
Yes.
Scott Edmund,
Yes.
Alan Brown,
Yes.
and I will also vote yes. Enjoy your accessory apartment, Mr. Kenefick.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Take care. We're just going to jump now to a new application. David Mike's Antique Shop, 588 Boston Post Road, map 48, lot 23, zone TS, site plan modification to construct ADA compliant accessibility ramp at the site of the building, receive and request action. So someone here to present for
Yes.
David Mike's Antique Shop?
Yes.
Hello, could you state your name and address for the record?
Hi, Elisa Mangino, longtime Guilford resident and designer here, and I'm representing the architect, Robert Mangino. The architect met with the building inspector and the fire marshal, and they requested that an additional ADA compliant ramp be put onto the side of the building. The ramp is not required, but it was designed by request. The ramp with handrails will be 5 by 7 on the right side of the building. There is one existing in front of the building, but there is parking on the right side also, so it'd be easier for people to enter the building. Again, this is not required, but we wanted to accommodate them. And the revision and the ramp went before the design and review committee and was approved.
Terrific. This is the former Royal Printing Building, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes.
Yes.
Terrific.
This is a modification to an already approved site plan. And timing did work out where the applicant was able to meet with design review. Design review had some comments regarding consistency in limiting the extent of railings to only install what's required by code, so that it was a little more visually pleasing. And those recommendations are incorporated into the conditions of approval.
Okay.
Should the commission wish to do that.
Any questions from commissioners with respect to this site plan modification? No? Any comments, concerns, anything from anyone? No? Do we have a motion to present? Alan, go for it.
Proposed motion, Mike and Dave. That the, excuse me, that Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approved a site plan revision for Mike and Dave's Antique Shop at 588 Boston Post Road, map 048, lot 023, to construct an ADA ramp as shown. Mike and Dave's Antique Shop LLC, dated 11/11/21, revised 6/1/21, prepared by Robert Mandigo, architect. The application is approved with the following conditions: that the ramp includes a top rail and a second or
Tertiary.
Tertiary. Yep.
rail only as required by code, and if the left-hand rail is not necessary to be removed. The applicant is approved based upon a finding that it conforms with the zoning code.
Great. Lisa, are you fine with that condition?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners other than tertiary? All right.
Second.
Thank you. I'll call the vote. Bill Freeman,
Yes.
Sean Cosgrove,
Yes.
Frank DeAndrea,
Yes.
Scott Edmund,
Yes.
Alan Brown.
Yes.
I will also vote yes. Enjoy your ramp.
Thank
You bet. What do we get? I think we can make a motion to close the public meeting. Is that correct, Aaron?
Well, the meeting is still a public meeting.
Okay.
There
We
are
have no more action items.
business items.
We're going to turn it over to Glenn. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct. So Glenn, we give you the stage to educate us on all the stuff you've been working on for us.
Wow.
Yep, there you go.
Muted. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Let me start off with an introduction. As you know, I've been working with George and Aaron on a comprehensive review of both the zoning regulations and the subdivision regulations. Commission earlier this year worked through the subdivision regulations. Those are on hold at the moment while we bring the street and sidewalk ordinances into compliance so that we have a total regulatory package. And so now we can turn our attention to the zoning regulation. As the commission knows, the zoning regulations are the main tool that a community uses to guide land use in the community. And so we've undertaken a comprehensive revision and rewrite of the zoning regulations to try to put a user-friendly framework for the regulations so that people, including the commission and staff and others, can find what they need easily to try to clean up the language. We did find some situations where the regulations contained some provisions that didn't reflect modern regulatory approaches. So the document which is before you tonight reflects a reorganization of the existing regulations, some cleaning up of some verbiage, et cetera, addition of graphics and similar things. As we did on the subdivision regulations, we tried to make extensive use of the sidebars on the pages to let the commission know the nature of the changes that occurred on these pages going forward. And you will find items there which are things such as ask the Planning and Zoning Commission or tell the Planning and Zoning Commission some of the changes that we have done. So I think unless George or Aaron have anything else they want to add to the introduction, I'm ready to get started.
Nope. And you have ability to share screen if you'd rather pull that up, Glenn, that's up to you.
Yep. Anything, George, anything? We're good?
No, I'm ready to go.
So again, so the regulations have been reorganized. I think the table of contents here lays out the basic nature of the regulations. Parts 1 and 2 are the introductory materials for the regulations, the statutory authority and how the regulations are generally interpreted, followed by the definitions of words and terms used in the regulations. Sections 3, 4, and 5 are zoning districts grouped by residential districts, then by business districts, and then by special districts. Generally speaking, most people have a piece of property in mind. The zoning map advises them what zone it's in. And so the typical first stop for most people is what's permitted in the zoning district. Section 6 contains use-related provisions. So this has to do with, as you can see, drive-through service, satellite dish antenna, keeping of animals, and similar types of provisions related there. The next section, section 7, are standards, and these are the things related to signs, parking, landscaping, lighting, stormwater management, erosion, sediment control, et cetera. So this is where you would find the standards related to site plan and other activities. Section 8 are some special provisions related to energy and sustainability. It's a new section. We'll talk about that in a future meeting, I'm sure. Non-conforming situations, excavation, fill and grading, communication antennas and facilities, and adult-oriented facilities. And lastly, section 9, which are the procedures in the regulations. Procedures would tell an applicant what it is they need to do to get an approval, whether it be a zoning permit or a site plan application with the commission, a zone change request, a tax amendment, et cetera. So based on my experience working with regulations, this type of framework allows people to quickly find and identify the information they need and understand what they have to do going forward. So that, I think, this gives the commission a general overview. Any questions on the organization before we start getting into section 1 here?
I just have one question comment is, how easy is it for a resident to identify the R zone that they're in? And I'm just wondering whether, you know, anything that is publicly available, and it may be right now, but as part of this, it might be appropriate to have a map so someone can just, you know, point and click and just say, oh, I'm in R1 or I'm in R5.
Yeah, so I think that's a good, Guilford is a funny community because of its, I guess, proportions. It's much taller north-south than east-west, so that it gets small on a page. But I think it would make sense to add an introduction up front with a click link, either a reduced scale map, because it's quite possible, for example, the R7, R8, they may be able to find that quickly, but add a click link as well.
We could also probably adjust the town website maybe, because right now the zoning map is in a different place than our zoning code. Like it's on 2 different pages. that might be able to keep those together.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's a good suggestion.
I agree. Just,
Yep.
The GIS map also includes zoning overlay as well, so you can add that on.
I'm going to change the view here to one page so that we can see the text, can make it bigger. I think the commission has this text in front of you, but I think for anybody else who may be watching along, they can see the text here on the screen. The first part here in the introduction is really the statutory authority to adopt zoning regulations. This wasn't stated quite this way in your current regulations, so we just called it out and said, listen, this is the power provided to the municipality in Chapter 124 of the Connecticut General Statutes. With regard to Section 1.2, these are the statutory purposes, which I'm just going to make a note here to go back and review. There were some changes to 8-2, but I want to make sure that we make this the most up to date. And so this is that statutory language here. Any questions on page 1? The next page, page 2, refers to the zoning map. As we've already discussed, the zoning map is an integral part of the regulations. And this lays out that the zoning map is a part of the regulations. And should there be any issue in terms of interpretation of the zoning boundaries, that there is a protocol here that will be followed in terms of determining that. And the commission is the entity which would make that determination. This is much more commonly used in old days when we had sketchier maps that didn't really have the accuracy we enjoy these days with GIS. But again, this is a situation here with regard to the zoning map. Now over here in the sidebar, you see this comment here which says tell PZC. We had a conversation with Chuck Andrus about this. There is a provision in your current regulations that says if a zone, if a lot is split into 2 zones, that one zone can be extended into the other zone by a certain number of feet. I recalled a Superior Court decision that said, well, that you can't do that. That's a effect of a zone change. And Chuck has done some independent research on this and has not come up with that case the way I recalled it. So this is an optional provision on the part of the commission in terms of what you want to do with regard to split zone lots. Any thoughts or feedback from the commission on this?
Yeah, just as a point of clarity, so you would extend the commercial into the residential or the residential into the commercial?
That's essentially the way the provision works. Let me grab it right here.
So we've had a couple of situations like this that have been, you know, where abutting neighbors, there was a commercial in the front, residential in the back, and the property owner wanted to extend the commercial, you know, all the way to the property line, and abutting neighbors, you know, rightfully so, said, you know, when we bought our property, we bought it next to a residential, you know, zoned parcel, and you're changing the nature of that now. Is this basically going to be allowing people to do that in split zoned parcels?
Your current regulations, section 273(5)B, allow the commission by special permit to authorize a use of land or building or structure in one district, but not permitted in the other district, to be extended not more than 20 feet. So it's not a huge extension, but it might be a matter of convenience. So I think there's 3 ways that the commission could approach this. The regulations are currently crafted in a way, the current proposed regulations are crafted in a way that that text has been removed, which means that the zone line is the zone line. And if a property owner wanted to move the zone line within their property, that's effectively a zone change application.
and without limit of footage.
Well, this regulation, the way this current text is prepared, there's no ability to extend. Somebody would have to apply.
Oh,
Okay, and the commission would review that on the basis of a zone change application, which is a legislative action the commission has broad and liberal discretion in those types of applications.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
other, go ahead,
I'm
Scott.
sorry. I was just gonna say that I would agree with that, considering that it seems like the amount of footage seems arbitrary and
Yeah.
doesn't seem to have any bearing.
That was
Yep.
my point, Scott. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. I think there was some text in the current regulations which describe the RS1 district boundaries, but with our current zoning map and the GIS accuracy, that is not needed anymore, so that was eliminated.
Okay.
So those are the provisions related to the zoning map. Any thoughts or questions from the commission here? The next page regards the application of the regulations. This section is new, but I think it clarifies the way that Guilford treats its regulations and makes it clear to the community and applicants, et cetera. Part A says if it's not permitted, it's prohibited. So the basic premise of the regulations is this is what we allow and that's it. You can't, interpret other things. B says that these are generally the minimum requirements of the regulations unless clearly they're characterized as a maximum limitation. C says if there's other regulations such as a town ordinance or state or federal regulations that also come into play with regard to a particular application, they're not intended to conflict with each other, but if they do, then the greatest restriction applies. A permit is required in situations where these regulations apply. And so that's again, sort of the application related stuff. 1.5 talks about compliance with the regulations. The uses have to comply. If you're going to create or alter a building or structure, that has to comply. You can't reduce the lot area or dimension in a way that makes it non-conforming. And there are some exceptions in here. Is that if there's an activity which has already received a zoning permit or a approval from the commission, it's protected from a regulation change. And nothing in these regulations prevents somebody from strengthening or correcting a structure. So again, these are generally fairly straightforward zoning type provisions. Section 1.6 are the enforcement provisions in the regulations. Of course, we have the authority to enforce these. Commission designates zoning enforcement officers or agents. They can inspect property, issue cease and desist orders, stop work, and then do any other enforcement action which is authorized by Section 8-12 of the Connecticut General Statutes or the Town of Guilford Ordinance for violation of zoning regulations. And then last but not least, each section of these regulations is severable from the other. So if there's a hiccup or a challenge on any application, it doesn't affect the whole set of regulations. We discovered that the regulations became effective in June 1953, but we're not exactly sure what day, so we picked June 14th. Yeah, the Ides of June, or we're close to it. And then again, when the commission adopts new regulations, those are the effective dates. So section 1 is a called introduction, but basically sets up the regulations and the basic framework moving forward. Any questions or thoughts on section 1? Next section is section 2. This relates to the words and terms used in the regulations. There are some basic provisions that basically say that these are the definitions which will be used. If there's any words or terms which aren't clear or need additional clarification, we've set up some other documents the commission can refer to in making its interpretation. Those include the State Building Code, Connecticut General Statutes, what's called the Illustrated Book of Development Definitions, Black's Law Dictionary, and a comprehensive general dictionary. And you can consult one or more of those, should you need to, in terms of any word, phrase, or term which it comes into dispute. There's some basic rules. Again, words in the singular include the plural, the present includes the future, Shall is generally mandatory, not discretionary. May is generally permissive. And those, again, set up the basic framework for the words in the regulations. And then there's some common terms that parcel includes the words lot. Zone also includes zoning district, etc. And then in the regulations, we have identified and used the phrases section, subsection, and this is the hierarchy, if you will, of headings that relate to those and how those are used in the regulations. So that's the general setup for the definitions.
Is it correct that it would be subsection, or is there another word for that, or no? Just curious.
Let me go take a look at that, Scott, because I think the issue here is if you're in a subsection to the section above, but
That's fine.
starting on the next page, we actually start getting to the definitions themselves. We've tried to organize them in a couple of ways and provide things that will hopefully help people interpret the regulations. The first thing is that we have grouped related terms together where it's important to understand the words. So for example, here, where my cursor is below this graphic, the concept of principal and accessory is an important distinction in zoning regulations. Yet when you get to the definitions, we define accessory first and principal comes much later. So you really lose the connection between them and understand them.
Right.
So several times you will note in these definitions, we've added this phrase to see where they're grouped together. And since principal is the primary topic, we put accessory over there.
Yeah.
And this is what you will see when you get to that point is a box like this, which is titled abut and related terms. We've defined the two terms which are related to each other and added a graphic in, so that should the commission need to determine whether or not this property abuts or adjoins, you can look at the graphic and understand how we mean and use those terms. And so we've thought that this approach will make the regulations user-friendly for people and help them understand the meaning of the words that they're reading here. Also on this page here, we've made a change I want to certainly bring to the commission's attention. In your current zoning regulations, acre is defined as 40,000 square feet. Now, an acre is 43,560 square feet. And so 40,000 square feet is what we call a builder's acre. And in years past, that was sort of a more general way to identify things. As you know now, we calculate lot sizes down to hundreds or thousands of an acre, and we have that level of information. And so we asked ourselves, what's the impact, if you will, of this particular definition? We checked all the locations in the regulation where the term was used and changed it from 40,000 to 43,560. So for example, if the regulations allowed a certain number of units per acre, that was 8 units per 40,000 square feet. And the new regs are now going to be 8 units per 43,560 square feet. So throughout the regulations, the word acre is now consistent in all uses and activities on that basis. But rather than have acre having, I guess, a selected number rather than the actual number, it seemed to introduce confusion. And so just bringing this to the commission's attention.
I mean, why didn't they just make an acre 30,000 square feet? I mean,
well, we could do that if you wanted
no,
to. Mr. Chairman.
I do not. I merely throw that out as it seemed arbitrary when the actual number is 43,560 to make it 40, but I'm glad we're getting accurate.
It wasn't uncommon years ago, but it is common nowadays to move in this direction.
It makes me wonder about the tax maps. Are those correct? So the correct square footage, or?
Generally they are, Scott, because they're based on the deeds.
You would think so, yeah. Okay.
So again, I guess we're getting in sync with the real world here. So that's the first page.
Hey, Glenn,
Yes,
you move back one.
Sure.
So at the bottom of the page, there's the reference to an 8.5. And there's really nothing in 8.5.
bear with me just for a second.
Well, I just, that's something I noticed.
Well, I mean, section 8.5 is in the regulations, I think, Sean. But just watch your eyes for a second because I'm going to scroll down.
Okay. Adult, okay, all right. I see it now. All right,
Again, watch your eyes, everybody. I'm headed back.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a printed version. I just didn't see it in there, so.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Check again and let me know. I thought every page was in there.
I will.
Somebody's got an extra set there, Aaron.
Adult oriented caught my eye. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
Did it?
So this next page, page 2-4, contains the definitions for affordable housing and area median income. Those phrases are used in some places in the regulations. We talked quite a bit, George and Aaron and I, about the concept of attached and detached and what that means. And this comes into play when we talk about different types of signage, different types of dwellings, different types of structures. And you'll see as we talk later on in the regulation, we are going to be talking about situations such as we've illustrated here, where accessory structures are close to the principal structure, et cetera. And what does attached or detached mean? So again, pictures we think are going to aid in people's understanding and interpretation of the regulations.
Pictures always help.
I think they do. We spent some time working with the definition of average finished grade. This is how we measure building height. The current definition of building height in Guilford is based on the height above the pre-existing grade. And we've changed this definition to define the average finished grade when the building is done. The situation that we can sometimes have in Guilford is that people will take the site down 5 or 6 feet or so, because that makes a taller house fit under the current definition. But 50 or 100 years from now, nobody's going to know where the pre-existing grade was. And I think the way that most people perceive building height is based on how it looks compared to the finished grade around it. And so this definition does that.
So
Talks
you're
about different elements or components of the building and treats the building height separately. So for example, if we have a site that cascades, or a building on a site that cascades down the hill, we don't measure the height from the very lowest elevation all the way up to the upper elevation, which compresses the structure. We allow each module or distinct portion of the building to have its building height measured separately. So a building can adapt to the topography and try to minimize excess earthwork, et cetera.
So we if I'm not mistaken, we dealt with this with the U-Haul facility, where there was I guess I'll call it a suspicion that there had been a lot of fill brought in, or taken out. The finished ground elevation shall not be more than 5 feet higher or lower. So pre-existing grade is problematic only. This may be the best way to do it, but I'm just saying it's problematic only from the standpoint that, some of the properties in this town are 300 years old or more. And how do we know what defines pre-existing?
That's part of the problem, John. Because the sources of topographic information aren't always as detailed or thorough as we might like. So we can look back at USGS maps, but those are 1 inch equals 2,000 feet on 10-foot contours. And we're getting down to building height. It can come down to a matter of inches.
Yeah.
So yes, we can get a survey and topographic survey for the property. But again, one of the things I noticed back working on the growth management strategies report many years ago was that people were cutting the grade down.
Yeah.
If the building height is 35 feet, they were cutting 5 feet out of the grade and putting in a 40-foot building and saying it complied.
I have a question.
What I'm questioning is whether, and I don't know how you would do this, and this may be too granular to even, get into this, but, should pre-existing be in the definitions?
Well, I think we've tried to get rid of the concept, Sean, of pre-existing. So I'm just going to make a note here to myself to search for the use of pre-existing, because I don't know that it's in here anymore.
I'm just thinking about the situation with the U-Haul facility, and we may, face this again, and I just would like to have more clarity so that, we have better guidance.
Yep.
Based on the regulations that are not so stringent that, it's so tight that no one can do anything, but not so loose that someone can drive a truck through it.
Yep.
I have a question about, say, an existing lot has a new road brought through, and they raise the elevation of the road, and the lot now is somewhat below the elevation of the road. How would this affect the construction of a building on that lot if they wanted to raise the building up and then fill the lot so that it was, positive drainage back to the road and things like that? Does that address that in this with that 5 foot plus or minus?
What the phrase up here says, I'll just highlight this if I can.
Finished. Yeah.
So we're going to be measuring the building height based on the average grade around it. So the dotted lines you see around these building components are where the average grade around a building will be measured. And what we're saying is that finished grade has to be within 5 feet higher or lower than the natural grade or the pre-existing grade within that 10-foot area, except as specifically approved by the commission. So if somebody comes along and says, with a unique site or situation or circumstance, I want to bring my house up to be to street level. I want to deal with the drainage issues, but turns out I'm going to have to raise it 7 feet to make that work. The commission can look at it, come to a conclusion as to whether or not that's appropriate, et cetera, mitigate the impacts, and then move on. So what we've tried to do, again, is try to find a blend here that we think works well.
And Glenn, based on your experience, having worked with many other towns, is this an issue that many other towns have dealt with successfully with this type of verbiage?
Yes, I think the challenge that sometimes you use Guilford as an example for other communities about why I'm not sure that your existing regulation situation works well. Communities have found that depending on land values and house prices and development pressures, not having this level of clarity as to how we're going to measure average grade can create some real sort of horror stories in terms of what happens and building impacts on neighboring properties, et cetera. So I think this is a precise way to measure it, and it treats the site gently by relating it to existing grade generally, this 5-foot rule, if you will, and also treating the different wings or distinct portions of the building separately allows it to kind of cascade on the hillside and do other things. So,
Glenn, I think the scenario that Sean is bringing up is a question of what if somebody changes the grade of their property and then 10 years later wants to build something. So the question I have, and I don't know if this is for Glenn or if this is for Aaron perhaps, but do we have regulations requiring like permit if you want to change the grade of your lot? That way there's a paper trail to show that someone has adjusted their lot's grade.
Current regulations state 5 feet of filling. If you're changing the grade up to 5 feet, that's subject to a site plan approval. I'd have to search and see that that was carried over into our grading and fill section.
So in my mind, that would be a way for us to have a paper trail showing that, hey, this lot maybe, and I don't know, Glenn, if that can relate to your verbiage here saying is natural grade what it was before they added, in this case, if they added 5 and they got it permitted, is natural grade what it is now after they permitted, or is natural grade what it was before they got the 5 feet permitted? You know what I mean?
Naturally pre-existing.
Right. So how would we handle that situation?
But wouldn't, if you got a permit to officially raise your grade, wouldn't that then become the new natural grade?
I would agree with you. However, it might need to be clear for someone that is just reading through this and trying to get a handle on it.
Could you do it again?
Yes, I think,
Yes, you get permitted as many times as the planning and zoning allows you to.
except that you've built a building on that basis. And so we're talking about the grade within 10 feet of the building. So unless you wanted your building on a platform or in a hole, you're probably not going to go changing the grade too much.
Oh, I agree. But again, and obviously U-Haul is an edge case, but it would be nice to be able to, instead of having that go to zoning board of appeals like it did, it would be nice to have kind of an answer.
Yep. So we'll go back and talk about that. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to tell the commissioner with regard to building height, there were some zoning districts that building height was measured on the basis of stories. George and Aaron and I talked about it. We recognize that stories can have varying heights, and it's really not a very precise way to measure building height. So we felt that the best way to deal with this was through the measurement of feet, and that's what this definition is about. So the relationships to stories have disappeared.
George, I know that in planning committee, we had some discussions about how height was determined based off of the angle of the roof and whether it was, does this account for that as well?
Yeah, you'll see that later in the text. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. That's perfect. Thank you. Is this all blessed by Mr. Champagne? Because he had a lot of opinions on it.
I think he wrote a lot of that, at least in our original text.
Okay, great.
That's not new.
The last thing I wanted to talk about the commission on this page was the definition of buildable land. I think in your current regulations, the definition of buildable land is built into the definition of lot area. So they're actually kind of two separate topics. Lot area is the perimeter of the lot based on the survey, and buildable area is the amount of the lot that is not characterized as wetland, inland wetland, tidal wetland, or a water course. And so that's a slightly different issue. So we coined this term to refer to that, and it's used a couple of times as we move through the regulations.
Our current regulations, if you have a 7-acre parcel and 6 of it is marsh, our current regulations allow you to almost maximize the development on that 1 acre that's not. Where this says you can't include those wetland areas as part of your, total lot coverage area. Is that correct?
So bear with me just for a second. Lot coverage. I'm going to make a note here to talk to George and Aaron to make sure we got this right. I'm reading ahead, Mr. Chairman, with section 2.3C. And 2.3C is a set of regulations that talks about how we're going to measure coverage. And that's really part of the issue that you were just discussing. I don't think it's as clear in this text on 2.3C as we might like. So we're going to look at that.
Thank you.
On the next page, we have definitions for building coverage, building height, total and average. Couple of things here to tell the PZC. Yeah, so we had this definition of building, which had language related to completely enclosed by a roof, exterior walls, along whose outside faces can be traced an unbroken line for the complete perimeter. It was kind of tortured language. So I think what we've gone here is that a building is a structure having a roof supported by walls or columns and used or intended to be used for the shelter, housing, and enclosure of individual, animal, process, etc. Anybody have any understanding or rationale of why that other tortured definition was there?
No.
Just for the sake of torture.
Again, building height, I think total building height is from the average grade to the highest part of the roof. The average building height, we'll see in a minute with the graphics, is generally the midpoint on the peak or eave. So depending on the type of the roof, this is how total building height and average building height is measured. So for a typical colonial with a gable or a hip roof, the total height is to the ridge. The average height is the midpoint between the ridge and the eave. The salt box is the same approach, but it's the higher side which is used because that produces a higher average height than it would if it was over here. The gambrel roof decides where the building height is measured by the height of the highest pitch break.
Mosaic, yeah.
Yeah, when I first looked at this, I couldn't tell the difference, but now I see the arrows and I can see the distinction you're making, Glenn.
Yeah. And then again, the same type of approach goes through a shed roof, even though it has a slope to it. It really depends how you perceive the height based on what side you're on.
Yeah.
So that if you're on this side, you perceive it as this. So in this situation, average and total are considered to be the same because you never know which way it's going to go, which side it's going to face. And the same thing for flat, mansard, dome, and the A-frame is a little unique and unusual. There's a penalty, and this is one of the reasons why we have total building height. So these are the graphics again, which are related here to building height. On this page, we got a little bit creative. And the reason is this. So the current regulations state that a 1.5 ton capacity vehicle is considered to be a commercial vehicle. And in this day and age, we're getting people with large pickup trucks and other things like that that technically can meet that definition, but isn't really a commercial vehicle. So we thought about and we allow for the parking of one commercial vehicle in a residential district. What is the purpose and rationale for doing that? And we thought that there were certain types of vehicles which are generally not considered a commercial vehicle just because of their size or nature. But then there were other vehicles that might be considered a commercial vehicle, or other vehicles, depending on their class and configuration, would definitely be considered a commercial vehicle. So in a residential zone, outside parking of one commercial vehicle, this is the stuff in the green outline, is permitted as an accessory use, and the outside parking of a second vehicle may be permitted if it's screened. And part of the language that helps guide the enforcement and interpretation of this language is also down here at the bottom. That some of the factors that can come into play about whether or not a vehicle is considered to be a commercial vehicle is whether or not there's the presence of logos or markings or equipment racks, or commercial plates or registration. So our thought is that in a residential district, you can park these vehicles, one of these, the second one if it's screened, but once you get up here into landscape vans, bucket trucks, minibuses, walk-in trucks, etc., those are not considered to be commercial vehicles which can be parked in a residential zone. These can only be parked inside a building or elsewhere.
Can I just, not to put Aaron on the spot, but Aaron, how often do you encounter confusion about our current regulations, and is it your opinion that this will clear it up? And would your enforcement duties be, you know, more onerous? You know, because I drive around and I see lots of properties with multiple, what I would consider to be commercial vehicles parked on their property.
I agree. I think this is one of our more common complaints in residential districts. I think this gives a lot more clarity than our existing regulation. I think it is useful. Having the visual also is helpful for individuals, property owners as well to reference.
Yeah, so, you know, if this, so this more, I think this is great, Glenn, just to make it more visible, more, the clarity to this is very helpful, but communicating it, you know, making it clear to the public. And I'm not sure if there's any consideration of a grace period for someone who's been doing, you know, doing stuff that is just not in compliance with even our current regulations. You know, I'm just thinking about all the people who've been doing the same thing for years and years and years and getting away with it.
I think enforcement is an art and a science. I mean, I think Aaron and George will be.
Well, Aaron is an artist and a scientist.
Yep. Well, we knew that anyway, right, John? So.
I think, you know, I hate to say there aren't any legally, there are some legally non-conforming contractor storage areas in residential zones, a very few amount. Whether someone has been parking unpermitted, you know, vehicles, commercial vehicles in a residential zone, they're not necessarily given any grandfathering or legal non-conforming status upon adoption of this. So, you know, at this point, most of our complaints are reactionary for what our enforcement is reactionary from complaints, and that's just given, you know, our current status here.
From neighbors, right?
Most of the time it's neighbors. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are some where I'll drive by and it's just, you know, it's something that I will look at and write an enforcement order. An enforcement order still gives a property owner 10 days to comply. And in some cases, they'll ask for some additional time knowing that they have to find a commercial yard. It's challenging, and I do see that a lot, that it's challenging to find a commercial location. However, you know, it shouldn't be in residential zone. So I think I like this setup. I think this is
caught my eye as something that would be very helpful.
Next page, just some basic definitions here. I think we've changed the definition of daycare to include daycare for children as well as for adults, which is a growing area, again, for possible consideration in the future. The next page is a clarification of the difference between a deck, patio, porch, and terrace. Particularly because yard setbacks and other things applied, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Next page deals with the concept of developable land, which also relates to buildable land. I'll make a note here also, Mr. Chairman, we will check this as well. And then the definition of distinct portion, again, defines which parts of buildings are considered to be distinct portions, and this relates to how we measure building height, et cetera. So if a building such as the one on the top left, the measurement of building height would apply to this entire building. For example, this building over here on the right on the top could actually have two separate measurements of building height, one for this main section and the other one for this. So should this cascade down the hillside in some way, shape, or form, it could have a separate measurement for building height. And again, could not exceed the maximum, but it's not constrained by the total building overall. The definition between a major and minor dormer.
How important is this?
Um,
A major and minor dormer. I just,
I need to search where else this is in here.
the communities where it's gotten to be an issue or problem are ways to start to work around building height
Yes.
and have impacts again on abutting properties. So the question is, how extensive is the dormer? So for example, a shed dormer where the entire back wall is pulled up, that reads as a wall, and it's a functional equivalent of different building height.
Yeah.
So since we're measuring building height as the difference between the ridge and the eave, what happens if you start filling that in with dormers, and how much can you get away with before now you're going to change the measurement of building height because of how the building presents itself?
what you're saying is the adding of a dormer adds to the average building height?
Only when it exceeds, I think it's 50% of the facade width.
Oh, okay. All right.
So in other words, a shed dormer, which is really, let's say, the full width, that's like a wall, and that's going to change the way the building height is measured.
Right.
And the threshold right now is 50%. So if you have dormers which exceed 50% of the width, that's more like a wall. And now we're going to measure building height based on the dormers rather than the top peak and the corresponding eave. Definitions for dwelling types. We made a change, or suggesting a change here for the commission about the definition of family. So the word family has a tortured history in zoning. So
Sure, yeah.
the issue that we end up with here is the clause or phrase related by blood adoption or marriage. We now have things like civil unions. We have other types of family arrangements or living arrangements, etc. So the suggestion here for your consideration is any number of persons living and cooking together as a single housekeeping unit. And the challenge we end up with is that you can have 8 or 10 people related by blood adoption or marriage living in a 3-bedroom house. And we don't regulate it. But should they be not related by blood adoption or marriage, it becomes a zoning violation. One of the examples I used in another community was, perhaps you're familiar with the TV show Golden Girls. Golden Girls is a zoning violation.
So our current regulations don't require the relation by blood adoption or marriage, I don't believe. That it really refers back, and I only know that because I have a neighbor that has housing for scientists, that they're not related. And when it came before us, and it was, questioned whether or not they had to fall under the regulation for, bed and breakfast or as a commercial use. And it was deemed that they were a family, irrespective of the number, how long they stayed, etc., because they cooked together, allegedly. But
So I think that this definition would address that, Phil.
okay.
But your current definition, I'm reading right now from page, section, it doesn't have a page number. So the definition of family from your current regs. One or more persons related by blood, adoption, or marriage, living and cooking together as a single housekeeping unit, or a number of persons living and cooking together as a single housekeeping unit, though not related by blood, adoption, or marriage. So it's that second clause, I think, that applied to the scenario you described.
Correct.
And I think all we're doing here is really kind of merging the two or favoring the second one over the first one, which says, okay, it's a number of persons living and cooking together as a single housekeeping unit, though not related by blood, adoption, or marriage. So I think we're trying to get to the same place, but with slightly different wording. But I think
Yeah.
this isn't, go ahead,
This is
George.
the same language as, this is the same intent as we have now, just a little bit clearer wording of it.
Well, and it takes out the blood, adoption, or marriage language totally.
Right,
So you could either be blood, adoption, or marriage or not.
right.
But you're living together as a single housekeeping unit.
How do we define living together?
They're all in the same house.
Right, but it could be for 2 days or 2 months.
We'll talk about short-term rentals. Is that what you're referring to?
No, that actually has more to do with, how we, if I'm not charging people to come stay in my house and they can come stay for 2 weeks or 2 months or a year, and they're not family members, but they're living. I'm just curious, it doesn't seem to define family if you're there for 2 days, staying for a week. Yes.
What Phil is describing is not a family in any way, shape, or form. It is just a collection of people who are there for any number of days, weeks, months, for, in some cases, a business purpose.
Absolutely.
I think where it is the fact that they're using the same kitchen, the same probably bathrooms. I think that's what's defining it.
Yeah.
I'm guessing here.
I appreciate your thoughts. We'll go back and take a look at this because I think the issue here, clearly this is not meant to incorporate or bless Airbnb. I think what we're looking for people who are residing on the premises. So in other words, if they have a driver's license, this is their place of residence. It's their address, if you will. But I don't think this wording quite gets us there just yet. So I've made a note here for us to come back, and George and Aaron and I will talk about this. And we'll come back to the commission with some ideas.
Great, thank you.
We have this funny thing in the regulations with farming, with the definition of a commercial farm and a non-commercial farm. We kept trying to work our way around this and just finally ended up leaving the language essentially as it is. A non-commercial farm is somebody's backyard garden. A commercial farm is somebody who's basically filing a Schedule F as part of their tax return, which is generating enough farm income to hit the thresholds. And it's also the threshold for the farm assessment program. So I think we're sort of okay with this, but the wording kind of troubled us a little bit. I think there had been a definition in the regulations for net floor area, and it really wasn't being used effectively, and it wasn't being proposed to be used, so we took that out. Added the definition for gross vehicle weight rating because we use that in our definition of commercial vehicle. I think there's an edit here of the struck through text. The concept of hazardous material is evolving, and tying it down to a 1976 publication and the 129 priority pollutants seemed to be a little bit sort of too limiting to us. And so we felt that we could just stick with the first sentence here.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
The definition of impervious surface, we just identified what is and is not included in that definition to make that more straightforward. I think as Aaron touched upon here, we're getting to lodging related terms, and we developed an approach of rental facilities. As a coastal community, we can have summer rentals. And we can have people who rent their house out because they're on sabbatical, but we can also have short-term rentals. So we developed this concept of a short-term rental to address Airbnb and other things like that. And the basic dichotomy we used was, for example, for Airbnb, is the owner in residence or not? In other words, if the owner's in residence and renting out a bedroom on Airbnb, then that's a situation which is likely going to stay under control and not have a significant negative impact on neighbors or neighborhood. If the owner is not in residence, now it has the potential that it's not being monitored, and it could perhaps be a more significant issue. And then what was the length of the rental? If it was less than 7 days, again, there have been scenarios around the state where that has posed a problem, but you can have situations, again, where it's more than 7 days. It's a longer term rental or summer rental or things like that, that it's less likely to be a problem.
Hey, Glenn, have other towns that you've worked with found this approach in terms of definitions to be helpful?
I think all towns are working on this issue and trying to figure out best approaches. I think the best approach for this is an ordinance rather than a zoning regulation. The tools for zoning regulations are really not that effective, and we have the whole issue of pre-existing nonconformities. The best solution I saw, Sean, was a bill that was proposed in the legislature, which would require all Airbnbs to register with the state, and there was a tax program to tax the revenue. And that was going to legitimize and cause all of them to have to register and be permitted locally. To my knowledge, that got lost in this legislative session with all the other stuff going on. But I understand there's interest in bringing it back on board. So I would have to say Airbnbs continue to be a work in progress.
So there's not just Airbnb, there's VRBO.
Yeah, I use them interchangeably, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
I think New York State changed it so that they're taxing Airbnb and VRBO.
I think you're right, Bill.
Yeah, I think New York City.
I had a rental property for 10 years that had 5 rental units. And at one point we started getting taxation from Airbnb and VRBO. So it was effective.
Again, section on sort of lot related terms. I think this is something to bring to the commission's attention. Kind of a substantive change in the regulations. We have this concept, in Guilford of front lot and rear lot, interior lot. The phrase that you're using was interior lot. The definition of interior lot referred to a non-conforming front lot as well as what we might call a rear lot. So after going through the regulations, I suggested to George and Aaron that we actually characterize these as front lots and rear lots. And then we can distinguish between them in terms of our regulatory approach and lot area and other requirements, et cetera. So the definitions here are meant to address this issue. Front lot is a lot which has frontage on a street and either meets the lot frontage requirements or has the buildable portion of the lot located near the street. A rear lot has less than the required frontage on a street, has the buildable portion generally to the rear of lots having frontage on the street, and has access via an access way or private right-of-way. What this allows us to do is differentiate between a non-conforming front lot. In other words, it's on the street, it just doesn't meet the lot area requirements, and then it gets some relief from some of the interior lot standards. So it's a change that we've carried throughout the regulations. I just wanted to bring to the commission's attention. Again, just definitions related to lot area and shape. We have a graphic down here. The lot shape requirement. We've added a graphic in for different types of lots and configurations, exactly where the front lot line or the side lot line or the rear lot line would be on these lots to help people visualize and understand what the setbacks need to be in different types of lot configurations. Again, a picture can be worth a 1,000 words here. We made a change to the way lot lines and setbacks are determined to reduce the number of rear yards on a lot. So generally speaking, in most zoning regulations, it's a front yard that has the biggest setback. Rear yard has the next biggest setback, and then the side yards are the smallest. So when you require multiple rear yards, you're really actually sort of impinging on that lot in terms of what can happen. Whereas if you treat a lot as having essentially one front and one rear and the others are all sides, it provides for setback and separation between the lots, but it doesn't create situations where you need variance requests and other things like that. So we felt that this was going to be kind of a practical approach to ensuring we had appropriate setbacks on lots, and not creating a scenario again, or providing some flexibility where variances wouldn't be required.
Is the corner lot still gonna have two front lots, frontages?
Yes.
Setbacks, yes.
So a front lot is shown here would essentially have two fronts and two sides. We've then regulations, just if there's anything too significant. Yeah, motor vehicle, good condition. That's, I have to say, it's the first time I saw that definition. Non-conforming related terms. Nonprofit facilities. Got into pet boarding, pet daycare, and pet grooming. We separated those three because they are allowed in different zoning districts, can have different impacts or be treated differently. So we're distinguishing between those, again, to provide clarity in the regulations.
Don't suppose you have a definition of a sanctuary?
A pet sanctuary, isn't that a,
Well, I didn't say pet.
Stephen King novel or?
More of an animal sanctuary.
Oh, no. Yeah, I read the paper. You're not drawing me in on this one, Phil.
It was worth chumming the water.
No. Nice try. You're breaking up on me, right? So this is the.
Very funny, Phil.
This page deals with the distinction between principal and accessory and tries to explain why this is an important concept for people to grasp, both in terms of a principal building or an accessory building or accessory structure, and pictures to sort of distinguish between the fact that, yes, the residential building is the principal and the detached garage is the accessory. And again, we've clarified here, and I think it's an important thing for the commission to realize as well. In a residential zone, we're going to start treating an accessory building as part of the principal building if it's within 15 feet of the principal building on the lot. And one of the things we've sort of seen over time is that the accessory buildings get closer to the principal building. They were built with accessory setbacks, then they become sort of absorbed by, and then it becomes non-conforming. So the issue is, listen, if it's within 15 feet, it functionally can appear that it's part of the principal building, and we're going to treat them as having the same setbacks. So we think this is a good approach to dealing with that kind of situation.
So if an accessory building is not within 15 feet.
It's an accessory building with accessory setbacks.
Oh, okay. So the accessory building has its own setbacks.
Yes, it does. And they're much gentler. So
Right.
for example, if you were to get a tool shed or, a Carefree building or Coloder Farms or any of the other companies that provide the sheds, you have some flexibility as to where that can be located. But if it starts getting close to the house now, it starts to behave as part of, and so we're going to treat it that way.
Okay.
Aren't there some size constraints as well for accessory buildings?
Structures less than 200 square feet have reduced setbacks and some permit requirements. And Structures over 750 square feet, a detached structure would be subject to special permit approval.
Okay.
This language, I think it is what Madison does as far as their accessory structures.
And is the 15 feet number, is that just from general experience, or is that rooted in something?
That this language was specific, well, the 15 feet was specifically from Madison, where we felt, I mean, I guess you can determine whichever number you would prefer. 15 feet seems fairly reasonable. If you ever were, it's not too far away from the house, but if you're looking to infill that area with living space and connect them, it's reasonable.
So the
for-
15 feet acts as a cutoff point for the closeness of so if it's closer than 15 feet, it becomes really part of the existing structure.
With respect to setbacks, yes.
With
Setbacks,
respect
yeah.
to setbacks,
Maintain
yes.
the principal structure setbacks.
Okay, that makes sense.
This box continues on to the next page where we get into the difference between a principal use and an accessory use. With all things which are related to principal and accessory, the phraseology of customary, incidental, and subordinate are critical. And so we've identified and defined those terms here as well. So that when we use the phrase customary, subordinate, incidental, we've got definitions to turn to. Not sure there's anything. Oh, there was a definition of retail package store that was been eliminated because essentially it is a retail store in terms of the zoning district that it's allowed in under the proposed regulations. We've also suggested the deleting the definition of a scenic road and eliminating the greater setbacks in the regulations on a scenic road. Sometimes houses closer to the road are what make it scenic. And I was also mentioning to George and Aaron that the designation of a scenic road could make an existing house non-conforming, and so that they couldn't add on to it in their current scenario without getting a variance because it could be a front yard setback. So I think we certainly want to be sensitive to scenic roads, but establishing greater setbacks might not be the most sensitive way to do that. Don't think we put in the list of state highways rather than just, most people would know, but it wasn't really defined. We deleted the definition of story because that term wasn't being used. We coordinated the definition of street between the zoning regulations and the subdivision regulations. The current definition talked about A1, A2, or B1 roads. Again, we tried to make the regulations consistent. I think we tied the definition of water course, inland, and tidal wetlands to the statutory definition. So by the use of this blue box, we're reporting what the statute said when these regs are adopted. But if the regulation at the state level should change, it's going to track what the new state definition is. The next section, section 2.3 of the regulations and section 2.4, I think are new sections, and I think they're kind of important here overall. This provides the mechanics, if you will, for how different area and dimensional provisions will be calculated and interpreted. So for minimum area, each lot or parcel is required to contain at least the minimum lot or parcel area specified in the regulations. Minimum area, minimum contiguous area of buildable land, and minimum lot shape. Again, these are the regulations which are going to apply through all of the zoning districts. minimum lot frontage, what the requirement would be, how the lot frontage is going to be measured on a permanent cul-de-sac. It doesn't have to be measured at the street line as it is for most lots. It can be measured at the setback line. How setbacks are going to be measured in terms of minimum or maximum setbacks, side setbacks, the requirements there. Also for rear setbacks, what happens in the CAM districts, and some of the exceptions in your current regulations related to these standards.
I think the one language, I'm not sure if we wanted to point out, was the a non-conforming lot using the setbacks of the zone closest.
Oh, thank you, Aaron. Yeah. Yes, thank you. So in the history of zoning in Guilford, some of the lots which had been smaller ended up in larger lot zoning districts. And so the larger lot zoning districts brought with them larger setbacks, particularly side yard and rear yard setbacks. And so we've added in a provision now that if a lot is non-conforming as to area, that the setbacks, you use the setbacks from the zone which is closest to what your actual lot size is. So what that does is it provides a little bit of flexibility on these lots to still maintain a proportional separation or setback from the neighboring property. But it might allow for a small addition or improvement to a building without having to go for a variance. Whereas you would have to go for a variance based on the larger setback. The setbacks now, you're on non-conforming lots only, you're allowed to be proportional to the zone size or the lot size that you actually have.
And coverage also, which is big in an R8 zone. We have a lot of 1 acre size parcels that only can have a 5% lot coverage. So now this gets them.
Aaron, thanks for pointing that out. I certainly did not want to go past that.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. We see a lot of those variances.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you're essentially converting them into, you're an R8, but you're then converting it to an R1, 2, 3, 5.
Most of this will occur in the R8 zone, where lots we had a lot of subdivisions in the 70s, late 60s and 70s that were R5 size lots. And when there was R5 zoning, because what was the year that R8, George, do you remember that? Was it 78? Okay.
Yeah, 78.
Okay, so predate 78, that used to be R5, and then the zoning regulations changed them to R8. So those are a lot of the lots where we see, one, they're classified as interior lots currently, so they have even greater setbacks. So this kind of resets them back to their regular, more appropriate setbacks and coverage.
We carried forward some special setback exemptions. As Aaron indicated, again, with regard to building coverage, impervious coverage, we've again related this to the actual size of the lot, floor area limitations, and then height-related limitations. So all of the provisions related to those aspects in terms of lot area, coverage, setbacks, building height, et cetera, are spelled out here. And that leads into section 2.4, which is the table, which says, okay, these are the common building features or attributes are on a parcel. Does this count to building? There are 3 columns. Does this count to building coverage? Yes or no? Does this count to floor area? Yes or no? And do the minimum setbacks apply? Yes or no? So you may recall in the definitions, we were talking about patios, terraces, decks, porches. Yes, sometimes the setbacks apply and sometimes they don't, and that's why we've added this. So for example, here, this section is set up based on the buildings or structures on the parcel, the main building, a cellar or a basement or the attic areas? Do they count the floor area, or when do they? Building projections such as eaves, chimneys, balconies, bay windows, rain gutters, do they apply to setbacks, yes or no? The same thing applies to accessory buildings and structures. What happens here with regard to setbacks and floor area and building coverage? And then special structures such as solar arrays or propane tanks, et cetera.
And this,
then,
I'm sorry, Glenn, just to touch on the floor area calculation, your note on 2.4, it's page 2.35. So the previous page, where we're no longer calculating or having that limiting factor of floor area in residential properties that we have now.
Yep. Thanks, Aaron. So we also address site features here: drives, walkways, fences and walls, trellises, pergolas, and similar types of facilities that can commonly occur on properties and people aren't quite sure how to deal with them. And so this lays out in the regulations what the general approach is for people to be able to look up.
One note I had here, Glenn, I'm sorry, 2-37 for driveways. You have minimum setbacks apply, see note. Are you referring to this red underline for the note, or where is that note?
I think it's the text right here, Aaron.
Okay.
So let's word that better, right? Because if
I
we're
was
questioning,
looking down for a note, and I think that's what, because
No,
all
what's
our
gonna-
other notes were like underneath tables.
yeah, no, good point. I think what's going to happen here, Aaron, though, is that as we work on this with the commission, we're going to be getting rid of these sidebar spaces. This table is going to expand out, and we'll have room here then to put this text in there.
With the actual note. Okay,
Good.
sounds good.
And so, Mr. Chairman, that gets us to the end of section 2, and the next part is section 3. Would the commission like to, the residential section is about 30-something pages long, so this could be a logical break point, or we could keep rolling, whatever the commission's preference is.
I'm all for democratic processes. How does everyone feel? I mean, if we said, you think we could cover it in a half an hour?
I don't believe that.
No way.
Get a crown.
Nice try, Mr. Chairman. No, I apparently not.
I tried the
Sure.
Jedi mind trick, but that didn't go over very
There you go.
well.
This
And
is
that-
not
it's
the
a
zoning
logical
section you're
break.
looking for.
in that case, I think this is probably a good spot to stop for this evening. And we can continue. When do you want to take up our next section?
Your second meeting in July.
Okay.
I'm good with that. If the commission is, we can continue on much like we did on the subdivision regulations.
Great.
In previous iterations, we met before the meeting, and is that still an option, or is it now switched to after the regular meeting?
Well, what we were hoping for is, it is a little challenging for some individuals to make it beforehand at a 6 o'clock meeting. We were looking to, this meeting was an exception. We did have some business come up, but we were trying to work to have all of our actual commission business occur at the first meeting of the month and dedicate the entire second meeting of the month to regulation discussion.
That's what I understood, but
Okay, we did. We had some minor glitches in scheduling and squeezed some things in this month, but next month will be solely.
I probably am alone in this, but I actually didn't know we were going to be doing this tonight. So
Oh, thank you.
it wasn't any, I didn't see it written somewhere. So
Oh, I apologize.
Bill,
I-
Bill,
I
before we
think
move on, let me just mention one thing that a question that you raised that everybody I think can be thinking about, and and that is, how do we measure density of residential development? This is something that we've, discussed quite a bit and tried to come up with a consistent definition. But right now we measure residential development either by minimum lot size, where we're talking about single family houses, or we, in many cases, as you know, measure residential development by number of units per acre. And then that gets to the question that you were raising, Phil. Under our current regulations, where we have minimum lot size as the measure of density, we require that the lots have a minimum amount of contiguous non-wetland area. So for example, in the R5 zone, I think we have a requirement that you have at least 40,000 square feet of contiguous non-wetland. And that then gets to how we measure density, where you have a minimum lot size. In the case of areas where we have number of units per acre, we do not exclude from that acreage, except for in certain cases, like for example, in planned residential development, we do not exclude from that definition of the divisor land that is quote unquote not developable. So we have, for example, 6 units per acre. You could have a 100-acre parcel that half of it's wetlands. You'd still be able to develop, at least in terms of the overall density, at the 6 units per total acre. So it's something we need to clarify and discuss how we do that. The easiest an easy thing to do would be just to delete from that divisor areas that are not developable or that are either steep slopes or wetlands. But that then is a pretty radical change for a person who owns property that now is allowed to have 6 units per total acre. And in the future, they're only allowed to have 6 units per developable acre if they happen to own a parcel that has a lot of quote unquote undeveloped land. So undevelopable land. So it's something we need to think about and develop a consistent strategy for how we proceed with this in the future.
George, so do we have any idea how many lots there are in Guilford that this might affect if we made a change like this?
I'd say no, we don't, but it could be pretty substantial. For if we went to a situation where we went from 6 units per acre to 6 units per developable acre, that could have a significant impact. Even if it's not a large number of lots, it could be impacting some very substantial sized parcels in a very significant way in terms of reducing the development potential. On the other hand, our current zoning, especially with properties that have a lot of, for example, wetlands, the residential densities that we allow are really much higher than you can really even realistically develop. A good example is the property that we used to refer to as the Waldo Russo property. It's now called Guilford Village West. I think it's a little bit over 100 acres of land. So, and it's zoned at 6 units per acre. So in theory, you could develop, based on that calculation, 600 units of housing, which the actual approved development, given all the constraints of wetlands and sewage disposal, turned out to be a little bit over 100 units per acre. So if you went to 6 units per developable acre in that parcel, it really wouldn't affect what you could ultimately develop. So it's something that we need to think about and clarify as we move forward. One of the things we probably sort of promised people that we wouldn't do in this new regulation is make dramatic changes in the basic zoning program, meaning significant changes in what you're allowed to do in terms of density, for example. So again, we want to keep that kind of mission in mind. If it's something we want to make a change in those directions, we have to be pretty clear and transparent as we move forward that that's in fact what we're going to do.
Probably another example for your statement is the one that's being done or that's coming forward on Whitfield Street, Eagle's Nest, Eagle View Landing or something like that. or I believe a significant portion of the
Yeah.
property is tidal wetlands.
Right, that's a good
But
example.
isn't it really driven by sewerage, George?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Bill.
I mean, come on. I mean, there's
controlled by-
constraints that are out there that don't have, you don't
Yes.
have to have you know, it's pretty easy to understand what you can do based on what you can do with sewerage. It doesn't have in
I
wetlands.
feel
You know,
like
between those
sewer
two
is
things,
really-
you're pretty constrained.
Yeah, sewer is really what controls your development possibilities on
Yes.
any lot. And
Right.
in that respect, shouldn't we be talking about bedrooms as opposed to units?
Well, that's a very good question. That's another way of looking
That's
at
very
this.
good. That's true, Scott.
That's what we do, for example, under our current regulations, under planned residential development. You know, you calculate the maximum number of bedrooms. That encourages, I mean, many people argue that it's, that's not so great because that encourages smaller bedroom units. So you get more units when you have the same number of bedrooms, if you have 1 and 2 bedroom units, and that discourages housing for families, for example. So that's another part of that overall calculation.
But this goes right back to what, Bill and Scott are alluding to, which is gallons per day.
Exactly.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
we discussed early on in the meeting with respect to the affordable housing project right around the corner.
Right. Right.
Well, and affordable housing certainly has a different types of units as opposed to.
So in a sense, it's imputed or implied based on the the ability of the land to absorb the regulations, absorb the amount of water per day based on the number of units. I mean, it's in the regulations. I just wonder if it should be more explicit. That's all.
Something we need to be consistent with and
Yeah.
have a plan for how we move forward with this.
Yep.
That's my point.
I guess my question then, George, is I always feel like the idea is we're not trying to discourage sensible and prudent development. So why would we put more constraints or make wetlands or uplands, or steep slopes, things like that, bad things? I mean, there's still people still enjoy the view of a beautiful marsh if you can then still get the proper sewerage and things like that in place. I just think we should encourage that kind of development.
Right.
One thing that I would raise, and I think Phil brought it up briefly when we were talking about developable area, was lot coverage, impervious surface coverage. Right now, our current regulations allow a property owner to take into consideration the entire parcel. So you could have 75% of your lot as tidal wetlands, yet your max impervious and coverage is based on that whole area. And that is something that I would encourage you to explore. That I think that's, I think we're in the minority in that sense, where we're allowing to fully extend, on a sensitive parcel, to fully develop that, the small portion of upland that we have.
So water and runoff mitigation on a property like that is more critical.
I'm sorry, I dropped.
So you're saying that the water mitigation and runoff on that type of property is a more critical aspect?
Well, I think as a sensitive property, yes, that I don't think
agree.
that you should be able to take into consideration that the wetlands as part of your overall building area, because it's not really. And
Get out of here.
I would typically agree. I guess devil's advocate, if there was more impervious surfaces in a certain area, wouldn't the stormwater management have to be designed to handle it anyway? Or is
yes,
that not?
an impervious coverage,
Sure. So that's what I mean. Whatever the impervious amount was, even if it was densified into a certain area, technically the stormwater should be able to safely handle that. I guess we have run into issues where who's going to maintain the stormwater, right? So it's probably not great to lean on that, I suppose. Maybe better to
And,
minimize it.
Aaron, you said you used a phrase or a term that I kind of caught on to, which is we're in the minority. What did you mean by that?
I think there are other towns, municipalities that exclude, some exclude even flood zones from buildable area. Old Saybrook, for example, excludes wetlands, inland wetlands, tidal wetlands, flood zones. Trying to think what else, Glenn. But I know, I think that we are, I think other towns are a lot more restrictive in what they consider.
What I would suggest, and I'm not sure how doable, how feasible this is, but I would love to have a better idea of how many properties might be affected if we, change the regs to exclude, to make this exclusion part of the regulations.
Yeah, we can look at that more closely. I didn't mean to suggest we could resolve this question right now. I think it's something we need to think about as we proceed.
And if I can jump in just for a moment too, I think when the commission gets a chance to look at section 3 in more detail, we've made some modifications to the conservation subdivision section, and we've tried to provide some new alternative flavors for residential uses and activities. And I think as George mentioned, all of these are predicated right now. The density is based on developable acre. So George raises a great question. So you may want to look in the definition section of the definition of buildable land and developable land as part of reading ahead for our next meeting, because I think that's where the issue becomes central. What is our base for density, and then what is the number being used? So that may be helpful to the commission.
Right. Thank you, Glenn. That's good. That's the way to look at it.
Are we good for the evening?
I think we have to do minutes. Right?
Yeah. Did anyone have a chance to review the minutes? I did. And I found them to be substantially correct. Would someone like to make a motion to
Motion to
approve?
approve.
Second.
Thanks. Bill Freeman,
Yes.
Sean Cosgrove,
Aye.
Frank DeAndrea,
Aye.
Scott Edmund,
Yes.
Alan Brown,
Yeah.
and I will also vote to approve. Would someone, with no further business before the Planning and Zoning Commission, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
By a show of hands?
Yep.
Yes, all in favor. Let the record show that it was by unanimous consent.
Hey, Aaron.
Thanks, Glenn.
See you in
Now-
July.
Glenn, thank you for your time.
Quick question,
Yeah.
Aaron. Now that we're being social again and people are talking to me about planning and zoning things, everybody keeps asking about what's going on across from the rock pile. And I wasn't around when that was approved.
Guilford Village West.
Yeah, what is that? Is it all residential or is there some commercial parts of it?
That particular development is all residential. There are two commercial properties up front as well that are also
Right.
owned by Cherry Hill Development, but we do not have any applications on those properties.
So all we have right now that's approved is the residential piece.
Correct.
And
They've
a ton of earthwork.
They're basically installing a road.
Right.
They've done 3 wetland crossings and that was phase 1, their wetland crossings, and now they're back further into the property, doing clearing and rock crushing removal. So that's phase 2.
That's a lot of investment.
Well,
Okay.
just out of kind of relating back to our discussion earlier, does that rock crushing change your average grade or your existing grade?
Those are all proposed, approved.
Right, it was all approved work, right? So.
Mr. Chairman?
Roads.
Yeah, we're actually adjourned, but hi, Matt.
Hey,
Nice shirt, Matt.
I actually, yeah, you like that one? Donated snot. Yeah.
I got one of those.
Yeah. I actually took the opportunity to take a ride up there today. First time I've been back there. I encourage all of you to take a ride back there and take a look at what's going on. These guys are within, obviously, I would assume, the regulations, but they've turned this into a mining operation. They are basically doing trap rock and small materials mining as they break down most of the ledge. You've probably seen piles in the front part of that property. Take a ride all the way to the back. They've got $1 million worth of equipment back there that they are just taking grade down and taking out stone and turning it into something that they can sell on the market. So I suspect that's a big portion of their anticipated return on this project is what they could sell as they strip it. But I encourage all of you to take a ride out there. It's wide open. There are no prohibitions about going back there, and it is pretty significant.
Aaron, was that part of their approved road profile, was to take out that material and dispose of it at they will?
I have had communications with their engineer of record and Cherry Hill directly almost weekly. And I'm out there almost weekly on the property. Yes, there are no prohibitions from removing the materials. Clearly, the amount of ledge that is, in this property, in order to develop the property, it does need to be removed. There have been conversations as far as an enforcement of other companies coming in to purchase directly from this property. And I have had conversations with the developer on that and have not seen, since those conversations, have not seen any other outside contractors coming in and having deliveries. However, yes, I absolutely believe that, yes, part of the removal of this is selling materials, yes.
Well, yeah, I think it's past life as a developer. I know that you do have ledge and you do have to get rid of it. It's not like you can grade it off. So I think that I just want to know that they had a plan and profile for a road that they're building, and they're taking out the material, which is rock in this case.
They're not like taking out more than necessary.
Yeah, no, they're not.
Well, they are taking out more than what is necessary for the roads. There's no question about it.
So did they have a plan of approval that for their road construction that
Yes.
showed the limits of the road?
Yes, there are approved plans from that.
Are they exceeding that greatly, according to Matt? I think that sounds pretty egregious.
I would have to speak with their engineer specifically as far as the extent of removal. If there's a concern, I wasn't in the office today or this week, so
You're on vacation.
had an opportunity to talk about this. But yes, there is an approved plan, and they're working within their approved limits of clearing. So that, and we have those plans on record, those clearing limits. So the clearing limits are not limited to the road itself, but to the residential development as well as the septic. Although the septic area has not been grubbed out at this point. But yes, the surveyor has staked out those limits of clearing, and the silt fence has been installed at that location.
So you feel that they're doing what's appropriate with respect to blasting and rock removal?
We had some dust complaints on the property as far as management of dust. There has been a well that was a temporary well, which they're using for their water trucks to fill the water truck. I have been in contact. I was just out there last Friday with Michael Ott, their engineer, and spoke with their contractor, who they're running the water truck through the road to try to reduce the amount. There was a neighbor on Catullo who complained about dust. Since that complaint, that was a couple weeks ago, I have not heard a follow-up complaint from him. It's, you know, clearly there are multiple sizes of rock being crushed. But no, I guess I don't have any other information at this point. I will go out. I can put a call into their engineer. But from what I could tell, they have not expanded beyond their limits of clearing. Although I am not denying they have an extensive amount of blasting involved in this.
They would have to get utilities in there, things like that. So I mean, there's a lot of blasting that goes on. So I guess I was just concerned that Matt thinks they maybe have gone, you know, wider than they should have.
Well, Bill, don't take that as my assumption they've gone wider. I was just surprised at the extent of the amount of materials that they're taking out of there, and it may well be well within the limits that Aaron just said. I was just surprised. I'm you know, I'm a city boy. I'm not.
It's a huge undertaking.
Right. It's a huge undertaking. I do know
that.
Yes.
Right. And again, you know, I wear a tie to work every day, so I don't know how these things work. But I was just absolutely surprised. I know it's a big parcel, and I know it's going to require a lot of work. But I was just amazed at what they've done back there. So, and that was not necessarily meant to suggest that they were overstepping their permits. So just a clarification there.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.